My name is Jenna, and I'm 32 years old. Growing up, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. My mother showered my younger brother with endless love and attention, while I was treated like an inconvenience. For 20 years, I endured the emotional abuse, the favoritism, the gaslighting, until one day I finally found the strength to walk away. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I finally stood up for myself after 20 years of being treated like I was invisible. Some of my earliest memories are filled with confusion and hurt. I was 5 years old when I first noticed something wasn't right in our family. My brother Justin was only 3 then, but he was already the center of our mother Karen's universe. She would light up when he entered a room, her voice softening whenever she spoke to him. With me, her tone was always different, sharper, more critical, less patient. I remember sitting at our kitchen table one afternoon, carefully coloring inside the lines of my coloring book. I had been working on the same page for nearly an hour, determined to make it perfect. When I finally finished, I proudly showed it to my mother. "That's nice, Jenna," she said without really looking at it, then immediately returned to helping Justin with his own coloring, which consisted mainly of scribbles across multiple pages. "Look how creative Justin is," she exclaimed, displaying his chaotic scribbles to me as if they were masterpieces. "He's so artistic, just like your grandfather was." This was a pattern that repeated itself throughout my childhood. Justin's mediocrity was celebrated while my achievements were barely acknowledged. My 7th birthday stands out as particularly painful. Mom had organized a small party with a few neighborhood kids. When it came time for presents, I was excited to open them as any child would be. I received a few modest gifts, a book, some colored pencils, and a small stuffed animal. But then, to my surprise, my mother brought out several beautifully wrapped packages. "These are for Justin," she announced, "so he doesn't feel left out." The other children looked confused, as did their parents. But that didn't stop my mother from making a spectacle of Justin opening more presents than I did at my own birthday party. Later, when one of the mothers gently questioned this, I overheard my mom say, "Justin is more sensitive. He needs the extra attention." My father worked long hours as a sales manager for a manufacturing company. He was rarely home, but when he was, he tried to be kind to both of us equally. Sometimes I'd catch him watching these interactions with a troubled expression, but he never intervened. Instead, he would later slip me a small gift or take me for ice cream, as if to compensate for my mother's behavior. As I grew older, I developed strategies to cope with being the less favored child. I became fiercely independent, learning to solve my own problems, since asking for help from my mother typically resulted in sighs of inconvenience or comments about how Justin would never struggle with such simple tasks. I threw myself into school, discovering that academic success brought me the validation I couldn't get at home. My teachers praised my intelligence and work ethic, and for a while I thought that if I brought home perfect report cards, my mother might finally see me. "Look, Mom, I got all A's," I said proudly in 4th grade, handing her my report card. She glanced at it briefly. "That's what's expected, Jenna. Don't look for praise for doing what you're supposed to do." Later that same day, Justin brought home a report card with mostly C's and a single B, and she took him out for ice cream to celebrate his improvement. Our home was a physical manifestation of the emotional disparity. We had a modest 4-bedroom house in a middle-class suburb of Minneapolis. My room had the basic necessities: a bed, a dresser, a small desk for homework. The walls remained the same pale yellow from when we first moved in. Justin's room, however, was regularly updated with the latest posters of his favorite bands or sports teams. He had a television, a gaming system, and shelves overflowing with toys and collectibles. When I asked why Justin had so many more things than I did, my mother simply said, "Your brother needs more stimulation. You've always been content with less." By age 8, I had already learned that in our family there was a golden child, and then there was me. I didn't have the vocabulary then to describe what was happening, but I felt the inequality in my bones. I began to wonder what was wrong with me, that my own mother couldn't seem to love me the way she loved my brother. As I entered middle school, the contrast between how my mother treated Justin and me became even more pronounced. I was excelling academically, joining clubs, and developing healthy friendships. Meanwhile, Justin's grades were slipping, and he was beginning to show behavioral problems at school. Instead of addressing these issues, my mother made endless excuses for him. When he was caught cheating on a math test in 6th grade, she stormed into the school to argue with the teacher. Justin is under a lot of pressure, she insisted. He's a creative child. These standardized methods of teaching don't work for his unique mind. The same week I won first place in the school science fair, and my mother couldn't even be bothered to attend the ceremony. When I showed her my blue ribbon, she said, "You should be helping your brother with his schoolwork instead of always focusing on yourself." Somehow in her mind, Justin's failures were everyone's fault but his own, while my successes were acts of selfishness. As Justin's behavior worsened, my responsibilities at home increased. By 13, I was cooking dinner several nights a week, doing most of the laundry and cleaning the house. Justin, meanwhile, had no chores at all because, as my mother put it, he's not detail-oriented like you are, Jenna. The real translation: I was viewed as capable enough to handle adult responsibilities but not worthy of praise for doing so, while Justin was too precious to be burdened with any expectations at all. During this time, I found an unexpected ally in Mrs. Rodriguez, my 7th grade English teacher. She noticed how exhausted I often looked in class despite always having perfect homework. After I stayed late one day to help organize the classroom library, she gently asked about my home life. I was guarded at first, but something about her genuine concern broke through my defenses. I found myself telling her about the disparity in how my brother and I were treated. I quickly added that I was fine, that it wasn't a big deal, minimizing the situation as I'd been conditioned to do. Mrs. Rodriguez looked at me with such compassion that I nearly cried. "Jenna, that sounds very difficult. It's not fair for you to be treated differently from your brother. You deserve just as much support and recognition." It was the first time an adult had validated what I was experiencing. She became a mentor to me, recommending books about resilience and occasionally letting me eat lunch in her classroom when I needed a break from the social chaos of the cafeteria. Books became my refuge during these years. I lost myself in stories about strong, independent characters who overcame difficult circumstances. I also discovered art, finding that drawing allowed me to express feelings I couldn't put into words. High school brought more freedom as I could participate in after-school activities that kept me away from home. I joined the debate team and the school newspaper, finding communities where I was valued for my contributions. But the contrast at home only grew more stark. My father was increasingly absent, often working late or taking weekend business trips. Looking back, I realize he was avoiding the toxic atmosphere at home. When he was present, the tension between him and my mother was palpable. He would occasionally try to intervene on my behalf, but these attempts were quickly shut down by my mother's tears or anger. When Justin was 16, he was caught shoplifting expensive headphones from an electronics store. Instead of allowing him to face consequences, my mother immediately blamed the store. "They shouldn't make these things so appealing to teenagers," she argued, "and those security guards were clearly profiling him." She paid for the headphones and somehow managed to convince the store manager not to press charges. When they returned home, she bought Justin a new gaming system to help him deal with the trauma of being accused. That evening, I finally reached my breaking point. Why does Justin never have to face consequences for anything? I asked my mother as she prepared dinner. "If I had been caught stealing, you would have grounded me for months." She turned to me, her expression cold. "You're just jealous of your brother's special talents. He's sensitive and creative in ways you could never understand. He needs support, not criticism." "What about what I need?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What you need is to be more supportive of this family instead of always thinking about yourself," she snapped. I retreated to my room and cried silently into my pillow, feeling more alone than ever. It was clear that in my mother's eyes, Justin could do no wrong and I could do no right. I began counting the days until I could leave for college and escape the suffocating unfairness of our home. Receiving my acceptance letter to the University of Wisconsin with a partial scholarship felt like being handed a key to freedom. For the first time, I could envision a life away from the constant favoritism and emotional manipulation. My mother's reaction was predictably self-centered. "Who's going to help around the house when you're gone?" she asked, frowning at the acceptance letter I'd proudly shown her. No congratulations, no pride in my achievement, just concern about losing her unpaid housekeeper. When my father heard the news, he took me aside and slipped me an envelope. "I've been saving this for you," he said quietly. Inside was $2,000 in cash. "Don't tell your mother. This is for your expenses, things the scholarship won't cover. It was the most direct acknowledgement he'd ever made of the inequality in our family. I hugged him tightly, wishing he could have stood up for me more throughout my childhood, but grateful for this gesture nonetheless. Moving into my dorm room that fall was exhilarating. My roommate Sarah was friendly and respectful of boundaries, a completely new experience for me. For the first time, I could decide how to spend my time without being guilted or criticized. I decorated my half of the room exactly as I wanted, joined study groups, and stayed up late talking with new friends without worrying about being accused of neglecting family responsibilities. But freedom from my mother's physical presence didn't mean freedom from her influence. The calls started within a week. "Justin is having such a hard time with you gone," she told me during our first phone conversation. "He's not eating properly. I think he's depressed." Every call followed the same pattern: updates on Justin's latest crisis, thinly veiled suggestions that his problems were my fault for leaving, and questions about when I'd be coming home to visit. Never questions about my classes, my new friends, or how I was adjusting to college life. 2 months into my first semester, the financial manipulation began. My mother called, her voice unusually sweet. "Honey, I need to ask a favor. Justin wants to take some classes at the community college, but we're a little short on tuition money. Could you send us $500 from your scholarship? You can surely get by with a little less. It's important for Justin's future." I was stunned. My scholarship barely covered my essential expenses. I was already working part-time at the campus bookstore to afford textbooks and supplies. "Mom, I can't. The scholarship money is just enough for my tuition and housing. I'm already working to cover everything else." Her tone instantly changed. "So you're too selfish to help your brother. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us." The guilt was crushing, but for once I stood my ground. "I'm sorry, but I need this money to stay in school." She hung up on me and didn't call for 2 weeks. When she did call again, she acted as if nothing had happened and made no mention of the money, a pattern of behavior I would come to recognize as typical. During my sophomore year, I met Michael in my psychology class. Intelligent, kind, and from a warm, supportive family, he was unlike anyone I'd ever known. As our relationship grew serious, I began to see my family dynamics through his eyes and realized how truly abnormal they were. "It's not your fault, Jenna," he said after witnessing a particularly difficult phone call with my mother. "What she's doing, making you responsible for your brother's problems, constantly criticizing you while praising him, that's not normal or healthy." I returned home for Thanksgiving that year, my first extended visit since leaving for college. Michael had invited me to spend the holiday with his family, but I felt obligated to see my own. I immediately regretted my decision. I arrived to find that my childhood bedroom had been converted into a gaming room for Justin. All my remaining belongings had been boxed up and moved to the basement. A futon had been set up in one corner of what was now Justin's second room. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, staring at the transformation in disbelief. "On the futon, of course," my mother replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Justin needs the space for his creativity. He's learning game design now, very promising career path." Justin, now 20, had dropped out of community college after a single semester. He spent most of his time playing video games and talking about various business ideas that never materialized. He was unemployed but somehow always had money for new gaming equipment and nights out with friends. That night, I overheard my parents arguing about the bedroom situation. "It's not right, Karen," my father said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. "Jenna comes home to find she doesn't even have a room anymore. She's working hard in school, making something of herself." "Justin lives here full-time," my mother replied coldly. "Jenna chose to leave. Besides, she's always been adaptable. Stop making such a big deal about it." "She's our daughter, too," my father insisted. "Are you saying I don't know that? Are you calling me a bad mother?" The conversation devolved into my mother crying and my father apologizing, as it always did. The next morning, the tension at breakfast was thick, but nothing had changed. I slept on the futon for the entire visit, while Justin enjoyed the privilege of 2 rooms. I returned to college with a new perspective. My conversations with Michael and the stark contrast between his family's interactions and my own made me see that what I had experienced wasn't just unfair, it was toxic. For the first time, I began to consider that maintaining a close relationship with my family might not be compatible with my own well-being. After graduating with honors in marketing, I landed an entry-level position at a digital marketing agency in Milwaukee, about 3 hours from my hometown. The distance felt both liberating and strategic, far enough to establish independence, but close enough to visit occasionally and maintain the appearance of being a dutiful daughter. The first year of my professional life was transformative. I excelled at work, made new friends, and moved into a small but charming apartment that was entirely mine. Michael and I continued our relationship, visiting each other on weekends when possible. His family welcomed me warmly, showing me what healthy family dynamics looked like. Meanwhile, the situation at my parents' home reached a breaking point. After 25 years of marriage, my father finally filed for divorce. During one of our infrequent phone calls, he explained his decision. "I should have done this years ago, Jenna," he said, sounding both sad and relieved. "The way your mother treated you, I let it go on too long. I convinced myself I was keeping the peace, but I was really just enabling her behavior. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better." His apology meant more than he could know, but it also brought up long-suppressed feelings of abandonment and hurt. Where was this insight when I was a child desperately needing an advocate? The divorce proceedings revealed the extent of my mother's financial irresponsibility. She had maxed out credit cards and taken out loans, much of it to support Justin's lifestyle and failed ventures. My father, despite feeling guilty about the divorce, set firm boundaries about future financial support. He would pay alimony for 2 years to help my mother transition to self-sufficiency. But that was it. Predictably, my mother's solution to this new financial reality was to move in with Justin, who was now renting an apartment largely funded by my father's continued support. Almost immediately, the financial requests directed at me increased. "Justin has a brilliant idea for an app," my mother explained during one call. "He just needs $5,000 for the initial development. It's going to be huge, like the next Instagram. If you invest now, you'll get 10 times your money back." When I expressed skepticism and declined to invest, she switched tactics. "We're family, Jenna. Family helps each other. Your brother would do the same for you if the situations were reversed." This was a laughable assertion given that Justin had never once offered me help of any kind, financial or otherwise. But it was my mother's next statement that truly revealed her manipulative nature. "If you don't help your brother now, don't expect us to be there when you need something. That's how family works. We remember who was there for us and who wasn't." Over the next 2 years, Justin cycled through various business ideas: a dropshipping store, a YouTube channel about gaming, a crypto investment scheme, and finally a plan to flip houses with no construction experience or startup capital. Each venture followed the same pattern: initial excitement requests for funding, minimal effort, then abandonment when success didn't come immediately. My mother supported each new idea as if it were guaranteed to succeed, pressuring me to contribute financially. When I refused, I was labeled selfish, ungrateful, and unsupportive. The emotional blackmail was relentless. "Your brother is depressed because his business failed," she'd say, conveniently ignoring that his business consisted of buying a domain name and creating a basic logo before giving up. "If you had helped him properly, he might be a successful entrepreneur by now." During this period, my relationship with Michael deepened. On a weekend trip to Door County, he proposed with a beautiful sapphire ring, knowing I preferred it to traditional diamonds. I was ecstatic, and his family threw us a small celebration dinner when we returned. When I called to share the news with my mother, her first response was, "I hope you're not expecting us to pay for an expensive wedding. Your father has cut us off, as you know." I assured her we planned a modest ceremony and would pay for it ourselves. What should have been a joyful conversation quickly turned to Justin's latest financial crisis. My engagement felt like an afterthought. Michael and I decided to host an engagement party at a local restaurant, inviting close friends and family. I reluctantly included my mother and Justin, hoping they would behave appropriately for one evening. My father, now living in Chicago with his new girlfriend, promised to attend and keep his distance from my mother. The party was nearly ruined when my mother spent the entire evening telling Michael's parents about Justin's entrepreneurial spirit and how he just needed the right opportunity. Justin arrived late, drank too much, and cornered Michael's father to pitch his latest business idea. The final straw came 3 days after the party, when I discovered my engagement ring was missing. Panicked, I called Michael's friends and the restaurant thinking I might have lost it. Then I received a text from Justin. Borrowed your ring for a few days. Have a potential investor for my new business. Need to look successful. Will return it next week. I was livid. When I called him demanding he return the ring immediately, he acted as if I was overreacting. It's just sitting on your finger doing nothing, he said. At least I'm putting it to good use. When I told my mother what happened, her response was worse than Justin's. You always were materialistic, Jenna. It's just a ring. Your brother is trying to build a future. Why can't you support him like I do? It took threatening to call the police to report the ring stolen before Justin returned it. Even then, my mother made me feel like the villain for being dramatic about the situation. After this incident, I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. For the first time, I heard terms like narcissistic parent, golden child, and scapegoat. The patterns that had defined my entire life suddenly had names, and knowing I wasn't alone in experiencing them was both validating and heartbreaking. As my wedding approached, the tension with my family grew. My mother and Justin had succeeded in creating stress in my relationship with Michael, though he remained steadfastly supportive. His parents, having witnessed my family's behavior firsthand, expressed concerns about their influence on our future. You don't have to invite them to the wedding, Michael gently suggested one evening. No one would blame you after everything they've put you through. But the programming ran deep. They're still my family, I said, though with less conviction than I once had. I have to at least try. Planning a wedding is stressful under the best circumstances. Planning one with a narcissistic mother and an entitled brother was nothing short of psychological warfare. Every decision became a battlefield. When I chose my best friend Amanda as my maid of honor, my mother was outraged. Justin should be your man of honor, she insisted. He's your brother. Blood is thicker than water. Mom, Justin and I aren't even close, I explained patiently. Besides, he's not reliable. I need someone who will actually help with the wedding preparations. That's so hurtful, she replied. You never give your brother a chance to prove himself. He's grown a lot recently. Against my better judgment, I compromised and asked Justin to be in charge of the music for the reception. It was a relatively simple task: hire a DJ or band within our budget, confirm the playlist, and make sure they had our first dance song. He enthusiastically agreed, claiming he had connections in the music industry that would get us an amazing deal. 3 weeks before the wedding, I checked in on his progress. He hadn't done anything. No DJ, no band, no plan whatsoever. I've been busy with my new business venture, he explained without a hint of remorse. But don't worry, I know a guy who might be able to help out. I'll call him tomorrow. I ended up booking and paying for a DJ myself, adding to our already stretched wedding budget. Then came the financial demands. 2 months before the wedding, my mother called with what she termed a family emergency. Justin's car broke down, she explained. He needs $3,000 for repairs or he'll lose his job. Justin had recently started working part-time at a local electronics store, his first legitimate employment in years. It was a positive step, so I was initially inclined to help. What exactly needs to be fixed? I asked reasonably. I don't know all the technical details, she replied evasively. But the mechanic says it's urgent. Something felt off. Can I talk to the mechanic directly? Maybe I can work out a payment plan with them. My mother's tone immediately changed. You don't trust us, after all I've done for you. After some investigation, I discovered the car repair money was actually intended to cover Justin's rent, which he hadn't paid in 3 months. He was facing eviction, and my mother was trying to prevent it without admitting Justin's irresponsibility. I'm saving for my wedding, Mom, I said firmly. I can't give you $3,000 right now, especially not under false pretenses. This led to a massive argument where my mother accused me of being selfish, materialistic, and obsessed with a party that lasts one day, instead of helping family who will be there forever. For once, I held my ground. The wedding is important to Michael and me. It's our future together. I'm not derailing that for Justin's rent when he's perfectly capable of working full-time. My mother didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that, a blessed reprieve during a stressful time. As the wedding week arrived, I was a bundle of nerves, not just about the ceremony itself, but about how my family would behave. My father promised to run interference with my mother and Justin, which gave me some peace of mind. The rehearsal dinner, hosted by Michael's parents at an upscale restaurant, should have been a joyful occasion. Instead, Justin showed up visibly intoxicated 45 minutes late, interrupting the event. "Sorry, everyone," he slurred, stumbling to his seat. "Had to take care of some important business first." The important business, it became clear, was drinking at a bar down the street. Throughout dinner, he made inappropriate comments and twice tried to give impromptu speeches about himself. My father eventually took him outside for some air and a stern talk. My mother, meanwhile, spent the evening telling anyone who would listen how Justin had always been the creative one in the family and had so much potential if people would just give him a chance. I went to bed that night with a migraine and serious doubts about my decision to include them in the wedding at all. The day of the ceremony arrived, and I tried to focus on the joy of marrying Michael rather than my anxiety about my family. The morning preparations with my bridesmaids were lovely and calm. My father came to the bridal suite to tell me how beautiful I looked and how proud he was of the woman I'd become, bringing tears to my eyes. But as the ceremony time approached, I realized my mother and Justin hadn't arrived. They were supposed to be there 2 hours early for family photos. My father called repeatedly, getting no answer. Finally, just 30 minutes before the ceremony was to begin, they arrived without apology or explanation. My mother immediately began criticizing the decorations and my hairstyle. Justin disappeared, only to be found in the venue's kitchen attempting to convince the staff to serve him alcohol before the reception began. The ceremony itself went smoothly, despite my mother audibly sighing during parts of our personalized vows. Michael's steady gaze and reassuring smile kept me anchored through it all. When we were pronounced husband and wife, the relief and joy I felt was immense. We had made it through without a major incident. The reception began well. The venue looked beautiful, the food was delicious, and our first dance went perfectly. Then came the speeches. As the best man concluded his heartfelt toast, Justin suddenly stood up and grabbed the microphone. This wasn't planned. We had specifically decided against having too many speeches to keep the evening flowing smoothly. "I've known my sister her whole life," he began, already slurring slightly. "And I have to say, I never thought she'd find someone willing to marry her." A shocked silence fell over the room. He continued with a rambling speech that included embarrassing childhood stories, backhanded compliments, and a bizarre tangent about his own dating life. It was excruciating. My father finally intervened, taking the microphone and smoothly transitioning to a proper toast that salvaged some of the moment. But the damage was done. I could see the discomfort on our guests' faces, particularly Michael's family. Later that evening, I overheard a conversation that explained my mother and Justin's lateness. They had stopped at the venue earlier that morning and tried to convince the coordinator to use funds we had already paid to cover an unexpected vendor issue. The vendor turned out to be Justin's landlord, who was threatening immediate eviction. The coordinator thankfully refused to redirect our payment. This infuriated my mother, who decided to show her displeasure by deliberately arriving late to the ceremony. The reception ended around midnight. As Michael and I rode to our hotel in the car his parents had decorated for us, I finally broke down in tears. "I'm so sorry about my family," I sobbed. "They almost ruined everything." Michael took my hand and kissed it gently. "They didn't ruin anything. We're married. That's all that matters." After a pause, he added, "But Jenna, you deserve better than how they treat you. You always have." In that quiet car ride, something shifted inside me. Michael was right. I did deserve better. And continuing to accept their behavior wasn't just hurting me anymore, it was affecting my marriage and potentially our future children. For the first time, I seriously considered whether having my mother and brother in my life was worth the pain they consistently caused. The months following our wedding should have been a blissful newlywed period. Instead, they became a testing ground for the boundaries I was learning to establish with my family. My first attempt at creating distance wasn't a complete cutoff, but rather a policy of limited contact. I stopped answering every call from my mother, instead setting aside specific times each week to talk. I made it clear that financial requests would be declined without discussion. I became vague about my schedule and finances, giving less information that could be weaponized against me. Predictably, my mother and Justin interpreted these boundaries as declarations of war. The frequency of their calls increased, often coming in the middle of the night or during important work meetings. When I didn't answer, they left lengthy, guilt-inducing voicemails. "I raised you better than this," my mother said in one message. "I sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay me, by ignoring your family when we need you." Justin's approach was more direct. "I need $2,000 by Friday or I'll be evicted," he stated flatly in a text. "Don't be a bitch about it." When I maintained my boundaries, the tactics escalated. My mother began calling my workplace, claiming family emergencies that required my immediate attention. Justin showed up unannounced at our apartment one weekend when Michael was out of town expecting to stay, just until things settled down with his roommate. I refused to let him in. "You should have called first," I said through the closed door. "We have plans this weekend." It wasn't true, but the alternative, spending 2 days being manipulated and guilted, was unthinkable. "You've really changed," he spat. "Marriage has made you stuck up. Mom's right about you being selfish." 3 months after the wedding, Justin was arrested for driving under the influence. It wasn't his first offense, which meant potential jail time and significant legal expenses. My mother's call came at 3 a.m. "We need $8,000 for a good lawyer," she said without preamble. "Your brother could go to jail if we don't get him proper representation." Half asleep and conditioned by decades of guilt, I nearly agreed. But Michael, awake beside me, gently took the phone. "Karen, we're not in a position to provide that kind of money," he said firmly but politely. "Justin is an adult who made a choice to drive intoxicated. He needs to face the consequences of that decision." My mother's response was chilling. "Put my daughter back on the phone. This doesn't concern you." "Jenna is my wife," Michael replied. "Anything that affects her concerns me. We'll talk about this at a reasonable hour if you'd like, but our answer won't change." After he hung up, my phone immediately rang again. This time I didn't answer. The voicemail my mother left included a threat I never thought I'd hear. "If you choose your husband over your family, don't bother calling yourself my daughter anymore." The next morning brought a barrage of texts from my mother, alternating between threats and pleas. Justin also messaged saying I was dead to him if I didn't help with the lawyer. I spent that day in a fog, torn between the programming of a lifetime and the healthier perspective I was developing in therapy. Michael was supportive, but let me make my own decision. By evening, I had made up my mind. I texted my mother, "I'm sorry about Justin's situation, but we can't provide the money for a lawyer." The response was swift. "Don't contact us again until you're ready to be a real daughter and sister." This disowning lasted exactly 16 days, ending when my mother called to tell me she was in the hospital with chest pains. "I didn't know who else to call," she said weakly. "Justin is useless in a crisis." I rushed to the hospital in Minneapolis, a 3-hour drive from Milwaukee, only to discover she had been treated for indigestion and released before I even arrived. When I called to check where she was, she cheerfully informed me she was having lunch with a friend. "Since you're in town, you should stop by the apartment," she added. "Justin needs to talk to you about an investment opportunity." The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it weren't so hurtful. I drove back to Milwaukee without seeing either of them, a mixture of anger and relief washing over me. The health scare had been nothing more than a ploy to get me to answer their calls again. 2 weeks later, I received a notification from a credit card company thanking me for my application. The problem: I hadn't applied for a new credit card. A quick check of my credit report revealed 5 new accounts opened in my name, all maxed out to their limits of approximately $5,000 each. Identity theft is devastating under any circumstances. When the thief is your own brother, it's a special kind of betrayal. After filing a police report and spending countless hours on the phone with credit agencies, I learned that Justin had used my social security number, date of birth, and mother's maiden name to open the accounts. He had the cards sent to his address but used my contact information for the applications. When confronted by the police, he admitted to everything with shocking nonchalance. "She wouldn't help me when I needed it," he told the officer. "I had to find another way." Even more devastating was my mother's response when I called her about the situation. "He needed it more than you," she said matter-of-factly. Your credit score is good, and you have Michael's income to fall back on. Justin is struggling on his own. He committed a crime, Mom. Against me. Your daughter. Don't be so dramatic, Jenna. It's just money. Families should share their resources. The legal process of clearing my credit and pressing charges against my own brother was one of the most painful experiences of my life. My mother called daily to berate me for involving the police in a family matter. Justin alternated between angry accusations and tearful apologies, depending on what he thought would work best at the moment. During this period, my career continued to flourish. I was offered a significant promotion that would require relocating to Chicago. Michael, who worked in software development and could easily find opportunities in any major city, supported the move enthusiastically. We decided to keep our new address private from my mother and Justin. It wasn't a formal decision to cut ties, not yet, but a practical measure to protect ourselves from unexpected visits and further financial exploitation. Of course, my mother eventually discovered my workplace's address through social media and showed up unannounced one afternoon, creating a scene in the reception area of my new office. "My daughter is avoiding me," she told my horrified receptionist. "I have a right to see her. I gave birth to her." Security had to escort her from the building when she refused to leave. My supervisor, thankfully understanding, suggested I take the rest of the day off. "Family issues can be complicated," she said kindly. "Take whatever time you need to sort this out." Later that evening, Michael received an exciting job offer from a tech company in Seattle. The position came with a substantial salary increase and growth opportunities he couldn't find in Chicago. We stayed up late discussing the possibilities. "We could have a fresh start," he said, his eyes alight with excitement. "A place where no one knows us, where we could build our lives without constant drama and stress." The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Moving across the country would mean putting physical distance between us and my toxic family dynamics, but it also meant leaving behind my father and the few extended family members I still had positive relationships with. After much soul-searching, we decided to accept the offer. We told no one in my family about the move until our plans were finalized. My father, though sad to see us go, understood and promised to visit. 2 weeks before our scheduled move, my mother somehow learned of our plans. Her call was explosive. "You can't move to Seattle," she said with shocking entitlement. "Justin needs you here. He's finally getting his life together and needs family support." "Mom, this is an incredible opportunity for Michael. We've already signed a lease on an apartment." "Break it," she demanded. "Family comes first, Jenna. Always. If you leave now, don't expect us to welcome you back when this marriage inevitably fails." Her words were like a lightning bolt illuminating the pattern that had defined my entire life. In her world, Justin's most trivial desires would always outweigh my most significant needs. My marriage, my career, my happiness, all were expected to be sacrificed on the altar of my brother's comfort. "We're moving to Seattle," I said with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "This conversation is over. If you choose to abandon your family, don't ever call us again," she threatened. For the first time, the prospect of not speaking to my mother didn't fill me with dread, but with something that felt surprisingly like relief. The decision to cut ties with my mother and brother wasn't made in a single moment. It was the culmination of years of abuse, manipulation, and disappointment. The final break came 3 days after we arrived in Seattle, when I sat down and composed a carefully worded email to both of them. "After much thought and consultation with my therapist, I've decided that I need to take a step back from our relationship," I wrote. "The constant emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, and disrespect for my boundaries have taken a serious toll on my mental health and my marriage. I'm not saying this is forever, but for now I need space to heal and establish a healthy life for myself." I explained that I would not be responding to calls, texts, or emails for the foreseeable future. I asked them to respect my decision and use the time to reflect on their own behaviors and how they had contributed to this outcome. The response was immediate and predictable. My mother called 17 times in the first hour after receiving the email. When I didn't answer, she left increasingly hysterical voicemails alternating between rage, "You ungrateful, selfish child," and despair. "How could you do this to me? I gave you everything." Justin's approach was more aggressive. He sent a string of threatening texts suggesting he would find a way to make me regret this decision. I documented everything, prepared to involve the authorities if necessary, but fortunately his threats remained verbal. The hardest part came when my mother activated the flying monkeys, aunts, uncles, and family friends, who began reaching out to convince me I was being cruel to a woman who had sacrificed everything for her children. Many of them only knew the carefully crafted version of our family dynamic that my mother had presented to the world. I found myself having to decide between setting the record straight and simply withdrawing from these relationships as well. In most cases, I chose the latter, recognizing that people who had already taken sides without hearing my perspective were unlikely to provide the support I needed. The first holiday season without contact was difficult in ways I hadn't anticipated. Despite the stress my family always caused, there was still a sense of loss and guilt as Thanksgiving and Christmas approached. Michael's family welcomed us warmly, including us in their traditions and giving me a glimpse of what healthy family celebrations could look like. We also began building our chosen family in Seattle friends from work, our neighborhood, and shared interests who showed us consistent respect and genuine care. For my 31st birthday, these friends threw me a surprise party, something my mother had never done, always ensuring celebrations in our house centered around Justin. Throughout this period, therapy was my lifeline. My therapist helped me understand concepts like parentification, being forced to take on adult responsibilities as a child, and the golden child scapegoat dynamic that had shaped my relationship with Justin. She gave me tools to recognize when guilt was appropriate and when it was merely the result of manipulative programming. "The grief you're feeling is real," she told me during one particularly difficult session. "You're not just losing your current relationship with your mother and brother. You're mourning the relationship you deserved but never had. That's a profound loss." This framing helped me process my feelings without questioning my decision. I could acknowledge the pain while still knowing I had made the right choice for my well-being. Perhaps the most unexpected support came from my father. About 6 months into my no-contact period, he reached out to schedule a video call. "I owe you an apology," he said, his face solemn on my computer screen. "I failed you as a father by not standing up to your mother's treatment of you. I convinced myself that staying in an unhappy marriage was better for you kids, but all it did was teach you that your feelings didn't matter." His words unleashed years of bottled emotions. Through tears, I told him about growing up feeling invisible in my own home, always second best to Justin, always responsible, yet never appreciated. "I know," he said, his own eyes wet. "I saw it happening, but didn't have the courage to stop it. By the time I realized how damaging it was, the patterns were so established that I didn't know how to break them. It was easier to work late to travel for business than to face what was happening at home." His honesty was both painful and healing. We agreed to work on building a new relationship based on mutual respect and open communication. He came to visit us in Seattle a few months later, and the time we spent together felt like getting to know each other for the first time. My professional life flourished in the absence of constant family drama. I was promoted again, taking on leadership of a major marketing campaign that won industry recognition. Michael and I bought our first home, a cozy craftsman with a garden that became my new passion. In my therapy sessions, I began to transition from processing trauma to building a vision for the future. What kind of person did I want to be now that I was free from the constraints of my family's dysfunction? What values were truly mine, rather than reactions against my upbringing? One answer emerged clearly. I wanted to help others who were experiencing similar family dynamics. I began volunteering with a local organization that supported teens from difficult homes, sharing my experience and showing them that breaking toxic cycles was possible. After 2 years of no contact, I received a letter, an actual paper letter in the mail from Justin. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened, but something made me pause. After discussing it with my therapist, I decided to read it, prepared to protect my boundaries if it contained more manipulation or threats. The contents surprised me. For perhaps the first time in his life, Justin took responsibility for his actions without excuses or deflection. "I've been in rehab for the past 4 months," he wrote. "Part of my recovery process is making amends to those I've harmed. I know I've hurt you in countless ways throughout our lives. I took advantage of Mom's favoritism instead of recognizing how unfair it was to you. I stole from you, lied to you, and treated you with contempt you never deserved. He explained that he had been diagnosed with several mental health conditions that, while not excusing his behavior, helped him understand the patterns he needed to break. He was living in a halfway house, working a steady job for the first time in his life, and attending therapy regularly. I don't expect you to forgive me or welcome me back into your life, he concluded. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the pain I caused and am working to become someone who doesn't hurt others that way. I hope you're happy and thriving in your new life. The letter left me with complicated feelings. On one hand, it seemed to show genuine growth and self-awareness. On the other, I had been fooled by apparent changes in Justin before. After careful consideration and discussions with Michael and my therapist, I decided to respond with a brief email acknowledging his letter and wishing him well in his recovery journey, but maintaining my boundaries. Interestingly, there was no mention of our mother in Justin's letter. I later learned through my father that she had refused to participate in family therapy sessions at Justin's treatment center, insisting there was nothing wrong with her parenting. They were no longer living together as Justin's recovery program required him to establish independence. 6 months later, I discovered I was pregnant with our first child. The joy of impending parenthood came with deep reflection about what kind of mother I wanted to be and what relationship, if any, my child should have with my family of origin. Michael and I agreed that my mother would not have unsupervised access to our child. Her pattern of favoritism, manipulation, and boundary violations made her an unsafe presence. If she couldn't respect me as an adult, there was no reason to believe she would respect my parenting decisions or treat my child healthily. Justin was a more complex question. His apparent recovery and self-awareness suggested potential for a limited, carefully managed relationship in the future. We decided to take it one step at a time, starting with occasional video calls to assess his progress before making any decisions about in-person meetings. As my due date approached, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. From a confused child wondering why her mother couldn't love her properly to a young adult trapped in patterns of obligation and guilt, to a woman who finally found the courage to prioritize her own well-being, each stage had been necessary to reach the peace I now felt. The family I was creating with Michael would be different. Our child would grow up knowing they were valued for exactly who they were, not for what they could provide, or how well they met arbitrary expectations. They would learn that love doesn't come with conditions, that boundaries are healthy, and that their worth isn't determined by comparison to others. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting ties with my mother. The question misunderstands the nature of such decisions. Cutting contact wasn't something I wanted to do, it was something I needed to do when all other options had been exhausted. The real question is whether I regret prioritizing my health, my marriage, and eventually my child's well-being over a relationship that caused consistent harm. To that, the answer is a resounding no. The hardest lesson I've learned is that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who were supposed to love you unconditionally but chose not to. Family isn't just about blood, it's about consistent care, mutual respect, and genuine support. I found those things not in the family I was born into, but in the one I chose and created. As I write this, my hand resting on my growing belly, I feel a sense of peace I never thought possible. The cycle of toxicity that defined my childhood ends with me. My child will never wonder if they're worthy of love or have to earn basic respect. That alone makes every difficult decision worthwhile. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to distance yourself from toxic family members? How did you handle the guilt and grief that often comes with such decisions? Share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only way to survive and eventually thrive. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and clarity on your own healing journey.